You're very welcome back to Unstable TV. So we have more coming in from our USA reactions playlist. But before we get into that, if this is your first time on the channel, do not forget to
like, subscribe, comment, share, hit that bell. And if you're back with us again, sound.
What are we talking about today, Danielle?
So today, James, in a lot of our American videos, we talk about guns and stuff and we always go pew pew. So we might as well learn about it while we're here too. So we're going to be looking at the origins of Americans' gun culture.
So one guy said, I would like a weapon. The other guy said, ain't no weapon for you. So let's learn this together. Let's go. Hola.
If you look at all the maps of the Spanish Empire you can find, you will notice that the Spaniards claimed far more land than they actually had, claims that were sometimes outright ridiculous, costly, and completely unenforceable. However, in North America, not only did they claim more than they actually had, but being that they were the first to colonize the American continents, one has to wonder why they failed at enforcing all their claims. Claims that stretched from Alabama to Minnesota to Alaska and even to Hawaii, over a total of what are today 27 US states. Guns and property is the short answer. The Spanish came to the New World to conquer existing societies, build new societies, and mold it all into their global empire. Unlike the Dutch, British, and French, who mainly had financial interests, the Spanish idea of empire had more in common with how the Romans built empires. They wished to export the Spanish way of life, assimilate conquered people into their society, and enforce a Spanish social structure upon their subjects. And part of Spanish colonial life was that the colonials were strictly forbidden from owning firearms. Colonial subjects didn't own firearms or even property, but were mostly day laborers on plantations and mining complexes owned by corporate interests like the Basque Guipuzcoan Trading Company. When Spain came to the New World, it encountered large native kingdoms such as the Aztecs, so Spain brought an army and conquered them. But when the Spaniards encountered nomadic native nations in places like Chile, Texas, Venezuela, and New Mexico, they ran into trouble. You can conquer Tenochtitlan, but how do you conquer a constantly moving group of peoples not dependent on one particular spot of land? The Spaniards encountered the same nomadic warfare that bested the Romans, Russians, and Chinese before them. And since they banned their citizens from owning firearms, the only way a semblance of security could be established was by an expensive military presence. In short, it was only safe to live where the Spanish crown stationed troops. Elsewhere, well, not so much. Caracas was burned down by a native warband when it was ungarrisoned by the Spanish army. The Spaniards fought an almost 300-year-long war with the Apaches, Suma, and Mansu throughout northern Mexico, Texas, Nevada, and New Mexico. And unlike the wars we know from popular culture involving the Americans from much later, the Spaniards lost. Ranches were burnt to the ground, mines destroyed, and entire towns pillaged and burnt. The Spanish army was hopelessly lost in this vast region, perfect for ambushes and hit-and-run attacks. Spanish settlers were barred from owning any firearms or form militias to defend themselves. Whatever expedition pushed further north and to the east didn't fare any better. Spanish expeditions sent to explore and settle Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi just disappeared, and presumably because they were wiped out by the Cherokee. Then, in the 1600s, the Spaniards started executing Pueblo shamans for sorcery and witchcraft. The Pueblo, who were a settled people, rebelled and kicked the Spaniards out of Santa Fe and the Rio Grande Valley, restricting Spanish activity to southern Texas and California from then on. The Spanish colonial social order didn't allow for a successful settling of this area, as it was unequipped to conquer and assimilate nomadic natives or patrol the vast lands. The British had a completely different colonial policy. They explicitly encouraged their colonial subjects to own firearms. More than that, they handed out the land they had taken from the natives to settlers. And that land, aka property, is the reason why most of these settlers came in the first place. Europe was a mess of large landowners, serfdom, high grain taxes, and famines. Political rights, if existent at all, were also tied to how much property a person owned. Having a plot of land that was your own was a prospect prospect irresistible to many, and irresistible to the British Crown was what these settlers would do on that property. Buy slaves, grow cash crops, sell them to British trading companies, and thereby increase the wealth of the empire. And the British also allowed the means of defending that property. The settlers would be personally invested in their colonial property and thereby the colonial economy. The British would profit, not have to spend money on an expensive large standing army, could invest in a large navy to bully others, and the armed colonials would take care of the French, natives and Spaniards because they weren't just protecting the empire but their own property. The mistake the British made in the end was assuming that this colonial strategy wouldn't backfire.
You next.
The colonial policy of handing out the land and permitting the ownership of guns for settlers is one the British practiced in every colony they settled, which is why all these countries have less constraining laws on private gun ownership to this day, except for those who in modern days introduced gun control laws. The United States, however, is different from the other colonies. Guns and the gun culture that developed became tied to property. The reason one owned a gun was to protect what was yours, or what you had taken from others. It became essential to the promise of the country to those who came to it, but also part of its darkest chapters. As much as you may read or hear of the American gun culture as something tied to a violent history, racism, hunting, frontier life or other, and as much as you might hear debates by legal scholars and politicians theorize the modern and past meanings of the Second Amendment, the truth of the matter is that this country's gun culture developed out of and goes hand in hand with the promise of owning your own property and being permitted to defend what is yours. And that is a powerful drive that is hard to break. German and French gun culture revolved around having guns to kill each other. Polish gun culture revolves around being prepared for invasion. Same with Swiss gun culture. And as Europe increasingly became a more peaceful place, these gun cultures, and with them the ownership of guns, eroded or were drastically changed and reinvented. The United States have barely enacted any regulations to limit ownership of firearms, even when a sizable amount of the population used said firearms in an armed insurrection to keep slavery legal. If the Americans didn't restrict firearms ownership after they were used in an attempt to keep slavery legal, I doubt they will do so now after massacres and increased gun crime. There is, however, one thing that is steadily undermining the United States gun culture and might eventually be its undoing, something that is largely unnoticed in the modern gun debate. Ownership of private property is on the decline. And with the American gun culture being so deeply tied to property rights, what is most likely to in the end change the legal landscape on firearms in the United States is the change of American society itself, from property owners into indebted, rent-paying day laborers.
Wow. So of course, a very big shout out to Original Content Creator. Do make sure you check them out, give them a like, subscribe and share, and all of that good YouTube stuff. Very big shout out to you guys for sending that through. Laura, a lot to digest, unpack, and just have a little look-see peel through. What did you think about that, Danielle?
I didn't know that the gun culture was so big because it was still property. I mean, yeah, defend your property, that's fine. Maybe don't use it in, other places that's not your property. Just, maybe something to think about. What do you think?
Defending your property, understand. Defending yourself in your private home, yes, absolutely. Mass shootings, no, that's disgusting. Going out your way purposely to harm people,
yeah, that's not right.
That's horrible. I'm sure there's a massive gun law debate in America, and I'm sure we'll have big debates in the comments. But if you want to debate in the comments, have a chat down there. Let us know your views. We are against guns, but we're not against defending ourselves.
No, it's not. Like, Ireland's not a big gun culture at all. Really, no one's allowed to have guns here. The guards walking the street don't even have guns. That's the police over here.
Yeah.
So only special units are allowed to have them. So, I remember I went to America. I went to New York, and then we seen a police officer with just a big massive gun. I was like, I'm a bit afraid right now.
Yeah, as soon as you step off the plane, even when we were in Canada as well, you could see a rifle on the guard straight away. I
can understand why it's a touchy subject in America, but it's a hard one. It really is, because what? Are you supposed to tell, the citizens to not defend themselves?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And then you have the other side of it, which is just, disgusting what some people are doing. But then again, that's only, a tiny minority of people that live there. So it's one of them things, which... It's hard to even comprehend even having that conversation from our side. So I can only imagine what Americans are like having that conversation.
Yeah, well, it's understandable. It's like, if you're going to disarm the people, all the government probably disarmed as well.
Yeah, it kind of has to be fair.
Yeah. The government shouldn't be allowed to hang on to guns. Like, at the end of the day, if it's going to be a disarm the people thing,
It has to be all the people.
all the people, even the ones that work in government and public sector, they'd want to put their guns away as well. That's where I understand where the American people are coming from when they're saying, well, why should we give them up and then you'll still have yours?
Yeah, that's not right either. It should be, democracy is supposed to help everyone, not just the rich.
Yep.
So yeah, video is a lot to think about. I definitely learned a bit more about why guns are important in America. What about you?
Yeah. I will say one thing as well. The Spanish got absolutely destroyed by the Native Americans. It was like the British in Ireland. They were not going to stand a chance with the guerrilla warfare.
Absolutely not.
Sorry to any British viewers watching, but that's the truth.
Spanish army was like, go over there and invade them with nothing.
Yeah.
Just walk in and say I'm taking over and then hope for the best.
Yeah, the Native Americans absolutely decimated them.
Yeah.
But like that thing as well, the British Empire were a bit smarter. They were like, you can arm yourself. Unfortunately, arm yourself comes with a consequence. They could take you over as well.
That's what it is.
That's the risk you're taking. Or you could just be wiped out like the Spanish was.
Yeah, but I suppose that's why the debate is even going on now about gun culture, because that's still relevant right now.
Yeah. So let us know your thoughts down below in the comments. How do you feel about gun culture? How do you feel about this video? Let us know any facts that might have been missed, or if you want to debate with us in the comments, join us down there and we will debate with you.
We can't wait to hear what everyone has to say.
That's been our 2 cents, and we'll chop ourselves out of this.